Seeing punches coming is a pretty useful skill to have if you want to be good at boxing. The last thing you want to do is shell up, look away, or close your eyes in a fight or a spar. By the end of this video, you will know how to see punches coming because you will understand what happens in the brain when you see a punch coming towards your face. You will know how to turn your flight response into a fight response. And also at the end of the video, I'm going to teach you how to think in the ring, because I'm sure you've heard boxing is a thinking man's sport, but when are you meant to think? So stick around for that. So what actually happens in the brain when you see a punch coming towards your face? Well, your brain undergoes a rapid chain of neural processing, which involves like multiple areas working together. But from my research, I've identified two different avenues that your brain takes when reacting to a threat or a punch. Okay, you've got your prefrontal cortex and you've got your amygdala. We're going to start with the prefrontal cortex. This is like the part of your brain that you use to create New Year's resolutions or plan a holiday in advance. It's like your logical, strategic thinking part of your brain. Okay, and this has a reaction time of 150 to 250 milliseconds, which sounds very quick and is pretty quick, but it's not as fast as your amygdala. But we'll get onto that in a sec. Now, your prefrontal cortex, this is where, in terms of boxing, this is how you set traps or you make like logical decisions on how you're going to land a punch or how you're going to adapt mid-fight to a different style that you weren't expecting. It's like that logical strategy part. The prefrontal cortex is only really active when you're relaxed. So if you're in like a super high stress environment where you need instinctual reaction, your prefrontal cortex gets overridden by your amygdala. Your prefrontal cortex is only used whilst you're relaxed, okay, and somewhat like out of danger. Whereas your amygdala, this is your instinctual reactive part of the brain, and this has a reaction time of less than 100 milliseconds, so it's like twice as reactive as the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is your like fight or flight response, okay, and it's super quick in reacting to like immediate threats in your environment. So if I was like in range in the danger zone, I'm basically relying on my instincts from my amygdala to be able to react to punches and counter. Whereas when I'm out of range and like moving around the ring, or I'm sat in the corner in between rounds, I'm using my prefrontal cortex to logically process what's going on. An important thing about the amygdala is it is active whilst you're under stress. Okay, so stress comes about when you've got a threat in your environment and your amygdala sends signals to adrenal glands. That's right, yeah. Adrenal glands to produce adrenaline. Adrenaline then pumps, makes your heart beat really fast, pumps loads of blood around your body so there's more oxygen going to your muscles so you can act in a flight or fight manner more effectively. Okay. When you're tense, stressed out, your amygdala overrides your prefrontal cortex, leading to more emotional, instinctive, and sometimes reckless decision making when you're in this stressful environment. Okay, so that's why we always talk about like being calm in the ring. So you can use this prefrontal cortex, but there's a catch, because we actually want to use both parts of this brain. We want the super reactive amygdala whilst we've got the super logical, strategic prefrontal cortex. We want them to both be working. And the reason and how we do that is through training the amygdala to still be instinctual and process threats quickly whilst staying calm, okay? Because we don't want to make emotional decisions in there. We want to be cool, calm, and collected. The flinching, the closing of the eyes, the looking away, all of that stuff, that comes from you not having trained your amygdala effectively enough, because you're reacting almost emotionally in a flight response as opposed to a fight response, which is what we're going to go over now. The same reaction time used by a top level fighter is in you. It's just that they've trained that instinctive reaction part of their brain a whole lot better than you have, right? So you have the ability to react super quick. It's just a case of training your amygdala and balancing out these two parts of your brain so that you can think under pressure and react quickly. Okay, and how you do that, there's 4 different methods, which we're just going to go through now. The first thing you can do, which is something you'd use sort of outside the ring, like pre-fight or pre-spar, And that's just to calm you down, put you in a more relaxed state. And that's called box breathing. You might have heard of this before, but it's where you inhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold your breath for 4 seconds and repeat. And what that basically does, it sort of reverse engineers the stress hormones. So the stress hormones make you breathe faster, but it's also irreversible. So if you breathe slower, you lower the stress as well. So that's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is increase your exposure to pressure. And you can do this through controlled sparring. So when you first get in there as a beginner in the ring, when you're sparring or whether you're fighting, you're probably going to be quite emotionally reactive to punches, which means you're going to do that shell up, the flinching, the eye closing. But over time, the more pressure you get exposed to through conditions, gradually increased intensity of sparring, you will become better at reacting and staying more relaxed in those high pressure environments. So for example, when you first spar, you just want to go super light because you're going to be super reactive, emotionally reactive to the punches. But then over time, you can build up the intensity to the point where you're always calm. And when you're sparring, like you're doing like heavy sparring, it's like, even if you get caught with a big shot, it's not like you're all flustered. You want to train that out of you as soon as possible. And you can do that through gradual exposure to pressure in the ring. Tip number 3 for training that flight response into a fight response is your pre-fight thinking or pre-sparring thinking. Right? This is something I learned early on when I started boxing. Remember, it was like my 5th fight or something, and I got stopped. And the reason I got stopped, or at least I'm led to believe, is because before going into that fight, I'd just come off a stoppage win. So I thought I was the shit. Obviously I wasn't. And then I went into that fight like thinking I was super competent, which is actually the wrong thing to do. So, you hear all these self-affirmations like, I am strong, I am powerful, all that fucking shite, right? That just doesn't work. Don't think about your competence. You want to think about how hard you've trained in the lead up, the amount of effort you've put in. And the reason for this, I got this from an Andrew Huberman podcast, but he said there was an experiment done between these 2 groups of kids. They both put them through, like say Group A and Group B. Group A, they both put them through this exam, and Group A, they said to all the students like, well done, you're so smart, gave them all these competence-based compliments. And then Group B, they said, oh, well done for trying, persevering, and gave them effort-based compliments. And they put them through another test, and the average grade in Group B like increased massively, and the average grade in Group A decreased massively. Okay, and that's because the kids now had this thought inside them that in Group A they were super competent, so they didn't even have to try because they know they're going to get good grades. But then in Group B they thought, I only get rewarded because I've put a lot of effort in. So they went and put more effort in the next exam, and lo and behold, got greater results. And what does that mean about boxing? It means before you go into a fight, don't think I'm amazing, think I've trained really hard. Okay, because that sort of rewires your brain to put it in the right mode so that you can actually execute and perform well. And I've seen this happen in my own fights. So clearly I'd got it wrong for that, my 5th bout. And then pretty much since I learned this bit of information, I used it in all my other fights, and I've been super relaxed before them, just super confident. And that's because I've thought about the amount of effort, the amount of training I put in to executing. That's tip number 3. Tip number 4 is having experience and a lot of repetitions put in over a specific skill. So how we talked about the amygdala is used in close quarters in the danger zone, where you see a punch coming, you need that super fast reaction time to just fire straight away. Well, through doing repetitions of a certain drill, i.e. if I see a jab coming and I'm constantly doing a slip right hand and I'm practicing it on the pads like thousands of times, then now this gets ingrained into my fight or flight response. So I'm changing it more from a flight to a fight. Instead of seeing a jab come in and flinching, I've trained my amygdala to think, oh, no, I'm not going to flinch, I'm going to slip and throw a right hand. And that's its new reaction now. That's how you get that fight response as opposed to a flight one. Okay, so it takes repetition of seeing a punch coming at you to be able to gauge the right reaction for when you're actually in that fight situation. So how is boxing a thinking man's sport, and how do you think in the ring? Well, as we now know, we've got the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, so we've got to use them and balance them at the right times. The prefrontal cortex, that's used when we're out of range, we're outside the danger zone, we're looking at our opponent, we're thinking like, how are they going to react if I do this? Okay, I'm going to make them react like that, and then I'm going to do something else. Setting up shots, coming up with sort of strategic tactics and plans. That can be done out of range, or it can be done sat in your corner in between rounds, or it could even be done before you even get in the ring, or after if you want like a bit of feedback and criticize yourself. The amygdala though, that happens when we're in close quarter situations. That's completely subconscious. It's just how our body naturally reacts to a threat. And this should only be relied on once we've done thousands and thousands of repetitions like we talked about. Being able to balance this amygdala, instinctive, super fast reactions with our logical, strategic thinker part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, being able to balance them well makes a good thinking brain for this sport. Okay, so you got to train them both, go over the 4 things that we talked about on how you can train these things, and do a lot of reps, and don't think you're the shit, think, oh, I've trained really hard. And that's about it. If you found this super insightful, which I'm sure you did, then I've got plenty more stuff like this in Hybrid Warrior Elite, which is my online coaching program. Link will be in the description if you want to check it out, or just go to hybridwarriorelite.com and I'll see you inside.